Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.com, and what I'll do today is talk about conditionals. And I don't mean conditional operators, we did that in the last video, but conditional statements and loops. So a conditional statement is just what's called a if statement, okay? So the way these work is you type if, and then here you in this parentheses, you're going to put a conditional statement of some sort, or a variable that has a Boolean inside of it. The idea is that it needs to test if something is true or false. Okay, and again, you don't have to do it in the parentheses. You could pass a variable where you separately store true or false and just pass that in there, or even just literally just write true. So if true, it'll run it every time. Okay, but let's say I did if, let me do this. We'll say num1, well, we'll say let num equal 1, and let num2 equal 4. Put my semicolons. Okay, and we're going to say if num is less than num2. So I'm saying if this is true, run a statement. Then what I'm doing is I'm going to create curly braces. Now this is where var and let really truly become different, because if I declare a variable in the curly brackets of a if statement under a var scenario, it's just going to get global scope. Okay, basically with var, it's global unless you declare it in a function, then it's local. Let is global unless you declare it within any set of curly braces. So that whether it's curly braces of a loop, curly braces of a function, curly braces of a if statement, that let only exists within those curly braces. So it's generally local unless you declare it outside of all curly braces. So that's the big difference. It's just better to always use let at the end of the day. Okay, so if num is less than number 2, we're going to console log. Yay. So let's see here. Is 1 less than 4? That should be true, so it should say yay. Yay! The console says yay. Now let's say we make this 6. So now that should come back as false, which means it will not run the if statement. So now my console doesn't run because the statement is false. So you can put whatever statement you want in here. Okay, literally you can, and again, it doesn't have to be a statement. It could just be a variable that holds true or false. And if you were to throw in, like if I were to throw in a number, I'm pretty sure just anything other than false or 0, it's going to basically treat as true. So if I wrote 6 in there, that should still treat that as truth. So yay. Okay, so generally assume everything is true unless you explicitly name it false. At 0, I'm pretty sure 0 is false as well. Save. Yep, 0 is false, and I think not a number is false too. Nan. That means not a number. So nan doesn't really mean anything other than whatever this thing is, it doesn't think it's not a number, so it can't really tell you much else. So save. If I refresh that, I think that should, yep, so nan is false as well. But again, if I put even the number 1, save, it's going to treat that as true again. So literally, or I can even put in a string. Hello. And it's going to treat that as true. Cool. So literally just think everything is true except pretty much nan, 0, or false. So I could type in false, and not false is a string. Watch this. If I type in false, save, it won't console log because that's false. False is a value. But if I type in false as a string, so I put quotations around false, it's no longer the value of false, it's the word false. So it'll probably evaluate as true. Yep. Okay, so just be careful. So that's how if statements work. Okay, and it's a one-time thing. So basically, it'll run the code in the curly brackets one time. What if you want to run the code in the curly brackets multiple times? Then you would use a while loop. Same idea. So while num is let's say less than num2, run this code. So let me change this back to 1. Now, if I leave it as is, so if I just sit there and I do this, console log, yay, okay? Problem is, num will always be, right now, 1 will always be less than 4. So it'll just run this, it'll loop this and say yay, 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 into infinity. I don't want that. So when you create loops, you gotta be very careful to make sure that there's an exit. So in that case, what I'm gonna do here is at the end, I'm gonna put num plus plus. So at the end of each loop, it's gonna increment num by 1. So eventually num will be greater than num2, or not less than num2, and it'll stop running the loop. So let's think it through how many times we should end up seeing yay. So num automatically equals 1, and num2 is 4. Num is less, so it's going to run yay once. Then it turns into 2, which is still less, going to run it again. Then it gets turned into 3, still less than 4, it runs again, and then it equals 4, it's not less than, so it should only run 3 times. So logically, it should only run 3 times, because basically it's doing this first and then running the check again. So let's see here if I am correct. And see, it says 3 times. It looped 3 times. Cool. So that's how a while loop works. Another type of loop, okay, so this one is checking a particular statement. So it's kind of like an if statement that loops. What if I just run a loop sort of a certain amount of times? I can do what's called a for loop. The way the for loop works is I'll create a variable. Typically people do I, so let I equals 0. Then I'll say run this loop as long as I is less than 5. And at the end of each loop, increment I. So you have 3 things. First one, you're creating your checker. 3, what are you checking? That means the second thing. And the third thing is what happens at the end of each loop. So that should loop 5 times because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. The 5th time, it's going to equal 5, so it will not run. Console log dot log. Yay! Save. Cool. So let me say that one more time. Now that I got all my stuff in a row, and see it loops 5 times. Okay, so that does what I expect it to do. Now, there's a concept called iteration. Iteration just means repetitions. Sometimes you want to iterate over an object. So you want to take an object and iterate over all of its data. Okay, so what if I want to iterate? So let me create an array. Okay, so let's say let r equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's my array, 6 numbers. Now I want to iterate through each of those numbers. So the way it'll work is we'll say for I, or it'll actually be for I always get this one a little confusing because there's 2 of them. There's like for in, for of. So I think it's I. So I is the variable. So that means I is our variable. I in R. So that means it's going to keep doing loop once for each item in R, and I is going to represent the item. I is our variable, and then I can console dot log I, which represents the item in the array that we're currently iterating. Okay, so let me make sure I got that right. Save. Yep, so that worked. So basically what happens is saying for every I in array, so for every item in array, and again, this could be anything. This could be duck. So for every duck in array, duck. And it'll do the same thing. So that first thing is just a variable. Okay. So the first time duck is going to equal 1, then the second time duck equals 2, then the third time duck equals 3, then 4 equals 4, then 5 and 6. So I can iterate over an array, and I can do anything with that data that I want. Another way you could do the same thing with an array is an array has a built-in for loop. These are referred is a method, and this method takes what's called a callback. A callback is when you put a function as an argument in a function. So bear with me for a moment. So if I do r dot for each, that's a method. Then again, like every function has this parentheses. What the parentheses does, it takes an argument, meaning I'm giving it information to use for the function. Except here, I'm going to give it another function to do. So I create my parentheses for my function in the function. I need to create a variable name, so we'll say duck again. This is just to kind of illustrate the point. Then again, with every function, you always put the little arrow after your parameters. And then I create my curly braces for the function inside there. Console.log duck. So I'm like literally here, I'm doing the same thing as I did before. The only difference is that instead of creating a for loop, I'm using a function as an argument to this built-in method in the array object that does the looping for me. You could just use a for loop if that's simpler. Okay, but it should do the same thing. And it does the same thing. Okay, so it prints out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all the items in the array. Now let's see here. And you could also do this over an object. So if we were to create an object, so say let obj equals name Alex, age 34. Simple object. Okay, in that case, it has to be, I think it's for of. So before every I of object. So basically what it's going to do is going to go through each key, so name and then age. Okay. And then I'm going to say console log dot log object. Okay. Which I'm pretty sure is just going to equal the key. Let's double check. So that means it'll just print out name and age. Save. So loop obj is not iterable. Obj equals. That should be iterable, but might have been either wrong thing. I and save. There we go. It's I in object. Okay, so there, so we go. First time it prints out the first. Let's see, whether printed out the object twice. That wasn't my intention. Okay, one moment. Takes us to an important lesson. That one of the big key things in programming is being able to search for answers and looking through documentation. So sometimes you're not going to remember everything all the time. So sometimes you have to look up stuff. So in this case, I'm going to look up how to Javascript. So that's the language I'm learning. And iterate over an object. Okay. Cool. So we find an article that explains it. Because a lot of times, again, even though you heard me go over today, so for variable, yeah, that's what we did. Oh, okay, I see. So I'm just printing out the whole lot. Gotcha. Loop through objects. First convert the object into array, then loop through the array. Okay, so it's saying that you could just do what I just did. But the better idea is to use something like, but just to wrap this up, bottom line is you could turn that object into an array by doing something like object.keys. So you could do object.keys. This returns an array of keys. So then what you could do is you could do .for each, because basically when JavaScript reads it, you can chain together methods. So while the object is an object, when I hit .keys, what .keys returns is a array, and then I can just do that for each method from that array, and then make a variable, and then do this. Okay, doc. Okay, and then I can, oh, I gotta set that up right. And then console.log obj.duck, because it's, since I did the keys, that's the name and age, what it's going to be doing is going to say, hey, print out object oh no, well, that's going to be, yeah, no, object.duck. So it'll be first .name, then .age. At least that's what I'm expecting it should do. So again, it's when you start getting into more complex iterations, it starts getting a little wacky. You got to practice these things. So let's see if that works the way I expect it to work. Object for each is not a function. Keys for each is not a function at index.3. I guess the better way to do it would be, we'll say let keys equal object.keys. And then we'll say key.forEach. So what I'm doing is that when object.keys creates an array, I'm assigning it to this variable called key, and then doing the callback for each, just to clean it up and make it look a little bit more, make sense. Key.forEach is, I'll have to play with that a little bit, but let me basically post this article here where you can read more about iterating through objects. It is a thing. I'll come back and do a different video on it. You could just do what I did the first time, the for in loop. Okay, but you could also just, use object.values and all these other methods. So I'll see you guys in the next video.